Bosnia, early 90s. The siege of the capital Sarajevo has crippled the country. Serb forces surround the city, and fighting throughout the countryside devolves into civilian targeting. This war is an ethnic war, brought about by the breakup of the former Yugoslavia. Ethnic Serbian strongholds throughout the country become known as the Republika Srpska. This conflict has always been about more than conquering territory, but it is rooted in the hatred of another people. Europe had not seen fighting like this since World War II, and international leaders, along with the UN, stood by as the humanitarian crisis grew. Then in July 1995, this war would see one of its most heinous acts, with the massacre of Bosnian Muslims in the small town of Srebrenica. Now, nearly 20 years later, we'd come to this land to uncover the history of the conflict and witness an annual event where victims of the Srebrenica genocide are still being put to rest to this day. Our first stop when we arrived was the city of Sarajevo, where our guide would share how difficult life was during the siege. This journey for us would not only teach us about the conflict, but bring us face to face with the victims of this war, who still mourn the ones they lost.
Behind me is all of Sarajevo, and this is a high overlook, and these used to be the Serb positions during the war.
And now you see the library down there, you see the old city in the square. And that's be the target of that. They stay here, they can shoot free without any problems.
Yeah, because they have the high vantage point. That's what's so difficult about this city. If it's completely surrounded like it was during the war, and then it aims down into it's like a big bowl, and everybody has these high vantage points.
This city calling for siege.
Yeah.
The Serbs have a position behind the hills.
Mm-hmm.
They shoot in the air, the grenades fall down. They can take a range about 20 kilometers.
Yeah.
If you have every 300 meters, you have one heavy gun. It's easy to cover the whole city.
Yeah, that's incredible. So they just rain down all the time for 3 years straight, like every day. We're actually standing right where the Olympic Games took place, and this is actually the bobsled course, and it's all bombed out and it's all shelled out. Look at this. It's a corner. You can see all the graffiti on the side of the walls now. You know, people were winning gold medals here, people cheering, you know, whenever you watch the Olympic Games, people are ringing the cowbells. It was like a time of joy in Sarajevo. And then, boom, you've got this now where it's just, you know, like almost an apocalyptic scene, post-war tragedy. The ski jump here.
Nothing up here. It's all really grown over and everything. It's weird, you know. It's really bizarre for what you think for a like past Olympic site. I mean, it's just empty.
You put like the Olympic rings up in pipes.
Yeah, it's kind of rough. This area just outside of Sarajevo is just vicious, like fighting up in these hills. You can see like when we were driving up, landmine signs kind of littered the whole road up and everything. And then you see right here, a metal platform, Sarajevo, 84.
It's got pock marks in the walls, isn't it?
Yeah. And the stories I heard, they used to actually do like executions on this.
You're thinking about this great world event that happened in 1984, and then just years later you're having where the whole city basically just went completely into war and siege. Inside, or was it just the siege outside?
No fight inside. Okay. Only the fight outside and on the line of confrontation.
Okay.
And you see from this point,
this is Sniper Alley.
Started the Sniper Alley. That started from here and 500 meters down.
This was all Sniper Alley?
Yeah, that hills belong to the Serbs because it's open space for the people to shoot from the mountain, from the high building, from the apartments, from the roof, and it's people be the living target during that walking this area.
So they would just target civilians.
Of course.
And would people have to run on this street across here?
Yeah. But you must be fast crossing this area.
Serb forces held all the high positions around Sarajevo, but somehow it seemed to serve their purpose to hold the town hostage rather than capture it. Snipers fired at anything that moved.
You could hear the gunfire, but you never saw the person who was shooting.
Correct. You could literally be walking and someone 50 feet in front of you just, falls over. That's it, they're dead.
They'd kill anybody, women, children, anybody.
They be so good in the job because they be specialists. The biggest siege in the history, it lasts more than siege of Leningrad.
Really?
Yeah. And the Serbs put 2,000 heavy guns around the city, more than around Berlin during the World War II. In the beginning, they shooting in the hospital. They try to destroy everything that is good for the people inside the city. They send the grenades like Santa Claus directly in the chimney. Grenades fall down like rain.
Wow.
During that period, the siege, more than 300 grenades fall down every day.
In the city?
In the city?
Yeah, in
Wow.
the city. Sometimes 1,000 per day.
During 3.5 years of fighting, 100,000 people were killed and over 2 million Bosnians fled their homes.
Bosnian Serb forces cut off the city and then trained their guns on it.
They followed a strategy simply of shelling the city and hoping to force it to surrender through political means.
So the Serbs, they just wanted all control, all the land, basically.
Of course, they have a plan to make a big Serbia.
And they didn't, the thing was, what did they expect? Just to kill all the Bosnians and just drive them away? Where were they supposed to go to? Like, where was the plan for you to leave?
They cleaned that area on the east. They all make the free territory for the Serbs. 60% of territory they take free. They make genocide, they ethnic cleaning, they move the people from the national habitat. They must leave. The place is only that they take a plastic.
Hearing about the war and conflict, it can be confusing to know who was fighting who. The simplest way to understand it is to realize that Bosnia is made up of a mix of many different ethnic groups. The largest of these ethnic groups are the Muslim Bosniaks and Orthodox Serbs. The war in Bosnia was drawn along these ethnic divides, with the Serbs of Bosnia having a superior fighting force that was assisted from the country of Serbia. In many cases, when Serbs would capture a Bosnian town or city, they'd force all Bosniak Muslims to leave, hence the term ethnic cleansing. But as the war progressed, ethnic cleansing became more than relocation and eviction, but genocide propagated by Serbs against Muslim Bosniaks. In July 1995, one of the worst cases of genocide would occur in the town of Srebrenica, where thousands of men and boys would be executed. Even to this day, they are still exhuming bodies from mass graves. Our next stop on this journey in Bosnia would be to head to the town of Srebrenica, where an annual ceremonial reburial of newly identified victims was set to take place. Thousands of mourners would soon descend upon the small town and finally put to rest the ones they lost.
Coming into the border areas, Will?
Yeah, we're tracing along this river. We're in Serbia right now, but we're about to cross into Bosnia. That's a bad storm, isn't it? So we're just crossing the bridge now. Now we're going over to the Republika Srpska, and that's where it gets a little bit confusing. I know for me when I was trying to figure out the past conflict, but that's actually in part of Bosnia, the Republika Srpska, and that's kind of what we're entering right now.
thunder?
It's ominous.
Before the war, Srebrenica was a prosperous mining town.
We're visiting a community still confronting the memories of a massacre.
There's a memorial service in Central Europe today, 10 years after the worst massacre on the continent since World War II. The killing was in the ethnic conflict of Bosnia-Herzegovina, part of the former Yugoslavia, where Serbs were trying to rid the land of their Muslim neighbors. Over a few days in July of 1995, Serb troops rounded up and executed more than 7,000 men and boys from the Muslim enclave of Srebrenica.
Bullet holes on that building.
There is. There's like this
of
huge.
people here.
Oh my gosh! I think this is where the bodies are being kept in there.
This is where the memorial site is. I think that's what those trucks are. I think exactly that's what those trucks are doing there.
Wood trucks.
I think the trucks are brought in the coffins. There's like 500 coffins they're brought in.
Oh yeah, those blue trucks back there.
Yeah, it's good because they've got like the Bosnian flag over them.
That's the old Portačar UN base.
Yeah.
Look at this here. This is the old UN compound here, and this is where all the Dutch soldiers would stay. And now you see it's like totally dilapidated. And that's the amazing thing about this area is still like 20 years on, you'll see places like this that are like looks like wartime still. And we saw like an abandoned bus on the side of the road. All these like really like rustic memorials, like either shot up buildings that you'll see in Sarajevo or shot up buildings out here.
What is that?
Yeah, so you can see like a blast right up there. The spirit of the war and the history of the war is still very prevalent today, and it's more prevalent than a lot of other areas that we've been to, because here there's still such animosity between the Bosniaks and the Serbs.
In the town of Srebrenica, you really see how just divided ethnically it is. You've got the Orthodox Church right there, and then right there you have a mosque, like literally right across the street. And this really became such a flashpoint. They just boiled over into this whole like ethnic cleansing in this area. So it's pretty amazing thing to see. Even now, like nearly 20 years later, you really just feel such a divide. What is this, like the old barracks or something?
Yeah, this is where you'd have like the Dutch soldiers, and they were part of the UN contingency, which would have these peaceful zones. And even the UN commander in the area came out to the people and said, "You're now under the protection. Anybody in this free zone is under the protection of the UN."
You are now under the protection of the UN forces.
The United Nations had designated Srebrenica as a safe area in which Muslims and others could take refuge from the attacks of Serb paramilitary forces that already committed ethnic massacres.
By July 1995, Srebrenica was a chronicle of a massacre foretold. 600 poorly equipped Dutch UN peacekeepers were unable to defend the so-called safe haven, sheltering up to 60,000 Bosnian Muslims. And NATO failed to deliver promised airstrikes against the besieging Bosnian Serbs.
The offensive had begun 5 days earlier. Serbian tanks spearheaded the blitzkrieg. They were lightning fast. With their superior weapons, they easily overran the lightly armed Bosnian government troops.
The man known as the Butcher of Bosnia.
Ratko Mladić was one of the men who engineered what became known to the world as ethnic cleansing, a disingenuous term for killing people because of their race or religion.
And in a fiery speech, the strutting general said, "Wherever a Serb is buried, that is Serbian land."
Mladić made a slash across his throat to one of the mothers of a child who was murdered by his orders.
The Serb general's eye view of Srebrenica as his car rolled into the town. Moments later, the general was moving among his men, congratulating them.
On the day Srebrenica fell to the Bosnian Serb army, everyone was taken to the town of Potocari, where they were told they were being sent to a free area.
That's correct. I'm actually standing on the former United Nations base here. This is where civilians and children fled, and it was right at the spot where General Mladić promised the women and children that no one would be harmed.
One of the most chilling images of Srebrenica's collapse is a blustering Bosnian Serb General Ratko Mladić entering the town, patting little boys on the head and addressing the frightened population.
At first, Serb units distributed chocolate and cigarettes among the Muslims, but after the families had been rounded up, the rapes began. A few hundred women and children were able to escape into the surrounding forests. Many were tracked down and beaten.
The Serb forces came around and the UN didn't fire a shot, didn't do anything. They just stood by as they basically separated the men and the women and took, most of the young boys and old men away and killed them.
In the next hours, Dutch peacekeepers turned over to Bosnian Serb forces thousands of Muslims who sought shelter in their camp. Tens of thousands of Muslims were bussed out of the area, men and boys separated from the women. In nearby warehouses, schools, soccer fields, and along the river, the executions were carried out.
According to the War Crimes Tribunal in The Hague, every single Bosnian Muslim man that was captured was executed. There were 8 survivors from these mass executions, but at least 7,000 men were killed.
The UN and specifically the Dutch peacekeeping troops there just completely failed to protect them in their hour of desperation.
In a 1999 report, the UN admitted its failures, declaring the tragedy of Srebrenica will haunt history forever.
Srebrenica is not simply another reminder of man's inhumanity to man, but how intelligent people can always come up with intelligent reasons to do nothing.
What always kind of stands out for us is, having been to Rwanda and seen the genocide sites there, which are just, you can't really put them on the same plane as this when you're talking 1 million people murdered within 3 months. But, genocide is genocide, and it's when, people are trying to wipe out another entire, race or ethnicity or people group, basically. It's pretty stark crimes, and what kind of shocked us in Rwanda was the lack of what the UN did. It's always kind of this very useless mandate. They're allowed to monitor peace, but they're not allowed to enforce it. Basically what they do is they stand by and watch the killings, and they can't do anything, and they don't do anything. And that's kind of always a hard thing for us to swallow, to see that, to be able to know that you can make a difference, and to know that these people were in a safe area and should have been protected, and nothing happened, and 8,000 people were killed.
For example, there were many video clips of Mladić in Srebrenica giving orders to his troops to separate army-aged men from their families before executing them and dumping their bodies in mass graves all over the region.
This episode took place over 2 days. Men and boys were lined up by Serb paramilitaries or bound up with ropes and shot at point-blank range.
Many of these men and boys were cursed, insulted, threatened, forced to sing Serb songs, and beaten while awaiting their execution.
Serb units used bulldozers to dig huge trenches for graves. Muslim families were rounded up as Bosnian Serb state radio played racist turbo rock anthems that bleated, "Die, you scum,
"We are the champs, hail the Serb race."
Other men fled into the surrounding forests where they were tracked down and killed.
Evidence says everything points to a methodical, step-by-step campaign of capture, transfer, and execution.
One of 8,000 victims of the Srebrenica genocide is recovered here from a mass grave in eastern Bosnia. The bones are later brought together.
Forensic experts are still matching human remains exhumed from mass graves with DNA samples of relatives.
Through DNA identification, they were able to identify bodies that have been found in mass graves.
7,000 body bags with partial remains still await identification, and 20 more mass graves await excavation.
I know that still to this day in Bosnia there is a ceremony to bury the unmarked remains of people that have been unearthed at Srebrenica. And so clearly there are still open wounds all these years later.
What many people might not know is that there's people who are officially missing. They've never found their remains. And every single year, more and more remains are found. And so this weekend, there's some remains that are going to be buried for the first time.
Where they brought in all the bodies. They've laid like over 500 bodies here, and as we saw the processions coming in, everybody was highly emotional. It's quite an event, you know, every year for people to come out, and each time they're burying new people. So, you know, people will come, they'll look at the tags on there, and they'll try and find which one is their loved one that they lost during the genocide, during the massacre. And so people were coming in, you know, young, old, everybody just to pay their respects in here. You even see some that are like, you know, just a small coffin, which are, you know, children. You know, so it's quite a remarkable thing to see. The people are just mourning, and you know, they're basically looking for, like, you know, resolution, and still, you know, kind of going through the past is very, very difficult.
Every day, buses arrive in Srebrenica with women coming to visit the graves of their beloved men. The crowd of mourners numbered in the tens of thousands. Many women wore white headscarves. White, as the symbolic color of innocence, was chosen as a statement of protest against the international community which stood by as the massacre took place over 3 days in July 1995.
Some of the people, for the first time in nearly 20 years, are coming across their sons or husband, you know, father, anything like that. It's like this is the first kind of experience of being that close to them, you know, and that long. And, you know, a lot of times it was so complicated with the mass graves. Some of the times the Serbs would re-dig up the bodies that were in mass graves and move them to another burial plot that, you know, the bones and you know, fragments and everything kind of gets pushed around so much. So it's taken so long to be able to, you know, not only find all the bodies, but to be able to identify the bodies as well. And usually, like every year, they put about 500 or 700 sometimes fresh bodies into the memorial park here. You can't imagine it. That's the thing you always, you know, we've been able to cover that before with like Rwanda, you know, but what kind of gets you always is like really just thinking what the people must have gone through at that point. It's like you hear so many different stories of people saying goodbye to their family members for the last time, and, you know, it's pretty rough.
Soon, reports about Srebrenica began to appear in the best newspapers and networks in New York, London, and Paris. There was consternation and even shame in those capitals.
Up to that point, the U.S. and Europe had stayed out of the Bosnian War. Srebrenica was a turning point. NATO bombed Serbian military targets, eventually bringing the Serbs to the negotiating table and an end to the war.
The war ended 5 months after Srebrenica, but the country was in ruin. The transition has seen its challenges, with countries like Russia still denying the genocide and many bodies still missing after multiple reburials by the Bosnian Serb army.
Justice would never come for many victims of the Bosnian War in the 1990s.